He said it like a budgeting tip. $75 every 2 weeks is plenty. Not angry, not cruel. Just certain. We were standing in the bank, side by side, like any other couple handling ordinary paperwork. The fluorescent lighting flattened everything, the counters, the brochures, even my reaction. I remember nodding. I remember the polite smile I'd perfected over the years. Plenty, such a clean word for something that felt strangely suffocating. The banker avoided my eyes. Or maybe I imagined that later. Memory has a way of rewriting small details to match the feelings you only understand afterward. The account was technically joint, but the decision didn't feel joint. It felt procedural. Already decided somewhere I hadn't been invited. On the drive home, he talked about groceries, about being practical, about how people our age needed to be careful. His voice carried that familiar tone of reasonableness, the kind that leaves very little room for objection without sounding irrational. I watched the road. I watched my hands resting quietly in my lap. I did not argue. That night, I opened my wallet and counted what I already knew was there. Not because I needed to, because something inside me had begun measuring things differently. Not money, space, breathing room, time. It wasn't one moment that changed me. It was a series of small recalibrations, almost invisible at first. Standing in the pharmacy, hesitating before buying something unnecessary, hearing his voice in my head, not as a memory but as an internal calculation. Do I need this? Is this reasonable? Would this be questioned? The strangest part of quiet control isn't restriction, it's adaptation. You don't feel trapped, you feel adjusted, efficient, managed, safe, even, until one day the safety starts to feel suspiciously like permission. Wednesday came wrapped in ordinary routine. He had a doctor's appointment. Nothing dramatic, just one of those age-related checkups that populate calendars with increasing frequency. "You'll be okay while I'm gone?" he asked. It was a harmless question, the kind couples ask each other without thinking. I smiled. Of course. After the door closed, the house changed. Not physically. Psychologically. Silence expanded into the rooms like something that had been waiting. I stood in the bedroom for a long time before opening the closet. The black suitcase was tucked behind winter coats. We'd bought it years ago for trips we kept postponing. Practicality again. Always practicality. Packing felt strangely methodical. Not frantic. Not emotional. Just deliberate. Clothes folded with care. Documents gathered with an attention I hadn't realized I'd been rehearsing mentally for weeks, maybe months. There's a peculiar calm that arrives when a decision is no longer forming but executing. No dramatic thoughts, no swelling music like in films. Only a steady, almost unsettling clarity. I paused once, holding an old sweater, something he'd given me early in our relationship, back when generosity didn't carry invisible conditions. For a moment, guilt flickered, not fear of him. Fear of being unfair. Fear of misjudging something that had never announced itself as harm. Then another thought, quieter but firmer. When did leaving start to feel like betrayal rather than survival? By the time his car pulled into the driveway, the suitcase was already in the trunk of mine. I didn't wait for a confrontation. Didn't wait for explanations. I was gone before the key turned. Driving away felt surreal but not cinematic. Traffic lights still changed. Pedestrians still crossed streets. The world, indifferent as ever, continued performing normalcy. My phone buzzed before I reached the highway. His name lit the screen. I let it ring. Then again. By the 10th call, the buzzing had become a rhythm. By the 20th, something heavier settled in my chest, not regret, exactly, but the weight of irreversibility. Because autonomy, it turns out, doesn't arrive wrapped in relief. It arrives tangled in grief. 63 calls. I know the number because I checked later, sitting in a small, unfamiliar apartment that smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone else's past life. The voicemail icon glowed quietly. I didn't listen. Not that night. Not the next day. Control had shifted, yes, but not into power, not into triumph, into silence. And silence has its own complicated gravity. Friends expected anger when they eventually heard some version of outrage, a clean narrative with clear villains and heroes. But the truth felt far less theatrical. He hadn't shouted, hadn't threatened, hadn't even believed he was taking anything from me. That was the part that lingered. How easily care and control can learn to share the same voice. Weeks later, I ran into someone who knew us both. The conversation stumbled inevitably toward him. He was worried, they said gently. He didn't understand. I nodded. Because understanding, I'd learned, isn't always symmetrical. Sometimes one person experiences stability while the other experiences erosion so gradual it barely registers as loss. That night, alone again, I finally opened the voicemail. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered, confused, hurt, still certain, somehow, that this had been a misunderstanding waiting to be corrected. I sat there, phone warm in my hand, feeling something that refused to simplify itself into righteousness. Freedom, after all, doesn't erase history. It just redraws the distance. And in the quiet of that unfamiliar room, I realized something both unsettling and honest. Leaving hadn't made me victorious, only responsible for my own life in a way I no longer knew how to postpone.